For more on this story, we can bring in Edward Howell, who's a lecturer in international relations at the University of Oxford. Thank you very much for speaking to us on France 24. I want to start with talking about Lee Jae-myung. Before Yoon's martial law bid, as our correspondent just mentioned, securing the presidency probably didn't look so easy for him. He was facing ongoing legal cases and was convicted of making false statements during his last presidential campaign. Tell us more about that.
Thank you. Well, Lee Jae-myung still faces ongoing criminal charges. They have been postponed until after election day, which is obviously today, and they will take place throughout June. So the first few weeks and months of his term will not be easy, particularly given these ongoing charges, which are very, very serious. They include the violation of election law in the run-up to the 2022 presidential election, in which he lost by a very slim margin to Yoon Suk Yeol. But they also include charges, including the sending remittances and facilitating the sending of remittances of $8 million to North Korea, which bodes not very well, and then raises actually serious concerns for a new government, a new South Korean government's policy towards the North.
Do you think it's likely then that he could be convicted after being elected?
We will have to wait and see. We know from history that the fates of South Korean presidents of both parties have not been good. I think the Lee government will face severe domestic challenges, particularly pertaining to South Korea's sluggish economic growth, the ongoing polarization in South Korean society, but also in terms of foreign policy. You know, Lee Jae-myung has expressed sympathy with China's criticisms of the US and China's criticisms of South Korea in the past. And he's also adopted in the past, he's made statements highlighting how the US, South Korea, Japan trilateral relationship was seen as pro-Japanese. So this does risk alienating and straining South Korea's already precarious relationships with the United States and with Japan.
And in the wake of this martial law bid by Yoon Suk Yeol, we saw divisive protests, some anti-Yoon, some in his favor. Can South Korean society move on from this and heal those divisions?
Well, I think the first thing to bear in mind is that South Korea has experienced polarization long before Yoon Suk Yeol's abortive declaration of martial law on the 3rd of December last year. Again, Lee Jae-myung's election is not the first time that a snap election has taken place in the aftermath of an impeachment. Okay, we saw this following the ouster of Park Geun-hye, after which the liberal left-leaning president Moon Jae-in took over in 2017. So polarization has been long-standing in South Korean society. There is, on the part of both sides, and in terms of the general public, a desire to heal division and to move forward, particularly given the aforementioned economic crises being felt in South Korea and also the foreign policy challenges. There is a need to move on and not to let domestic politics get in the way of an increasingly hostile and threatening geopolitical environment in which South Korea is situated. It's not just North Korea, which is increasing its belligerence, but also China, Russia, and the cooperation between all three actors as well.
So where does this leave Yoon's People Power Party? How do they rebuild from this?
Well, we know that Yoon's People Power Party according to the exit polls, suffered significant defeat. We know that in the prelude to today's election, there was conflict between different candidates, Kim Moon-soo, the eventual candidate, but also the former acting president, Han Duck-soo, amongst others. I think there is a need for both main political parties, but also other political parties. There are more than this. There are not just two political parties in South Korea, to avoid letting internecine disputes from within the party affecting foreign policy. I do think that now is a juncture, a critical moment for South Korea to recognize the need to ally with the US, to strengthen ties with Japan, which have not always been easy, and which arguably, actually, the Yoon Suk Yeol administration was very successful at in terms of trying to repair relations between Seoul and Tokyo. Given what we face, given what South Korea faces in its immediate vicinity and beyond. And I think the need to deter China, North Korea, Russia as well is extremely important.
All right, Edward Howell from Oxford University. That's all we have time for. Thank you very much for speaking to us.